Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to read two really short chapters on the island of the Blue Dolphins. Mine is chapter 12, starts on page 74 of my book. I'm not sure what page it will be on yours, but if you'll find chapter 12, also on GroupMe, I have put a link to be able to get to this paper for you. This is an open book test on the chapters that we've read up through page 73. So I would like for you to, if you can, print it off. If you can't print it off, then you can look at it and just use a piece of notebook paper and write the answers. But make sure you say Island of the Blue Dolphins test 1, and then you can write the answers and number them, please. This should be a real easy 100 for you. When you finish, put it in wherever it is you're keeping your papers. If it's in a folder or if it's in a large envelope, whenever the school tells us to be able to make that transfer to be able to get your work so that I can grade it, they'll let us know. But today I want you to turn to chapter 12, and that's where I'll be reading. You can read along with me. Many years before, 2 whales had washed up on the sand spit. Most of the bones had been taken away to make ornaments, but ribs were still there, half buried in the sand. These I used in making the fence. One by one, I dug them up and carried them to the headland. They were long and curved, and when I had scooped out holes and set them in the earth, they stood taller than I did. I put the ribs together with their edges almost touching and standing so that they curved outward, which made them impossible to climb. Between them, I wove many strands of bullkep, which shrinks as it dries and pulls very tight. I would have used seal sinew to bind the ribs together, for this is stronger than kelp, but wild animals like it and would soon have gnawed the fence down. Much time went into its building. It would have taken me longer, except that the rock made one end of the fence and part of the side. For a place to go in and out, I dug a hole under the fence just wide and deep enough to crawl through. The bottom and sides I lined with stones. On the outside, I covered the hole with a mat woven of brush to shed the rain, and on the inside with a flat rock, which I was strong enough to move. I was able to take 8 steps between the sides of the fence, which gave me all the room I could need to store the things I gathered and wished to protect. I built the fence first because it was too cold to sleep on the rock, and I did not like to sleep in the shelter I had made until I was safe from the wild dogs. The house took longer to build than the fence because it rained many days and because the wood which I needed was scarce. There was a legend among our people that the island had once been covered with tall trees. This was a long time ago at the beginning of the world when Tumuyuwit and Muscat ruled. The 2 gods quarreled among many things, but Tumuyuwit wished people to die. Muscat did not. Tumuyuwit angrily went down to another world under his world, taking his belongings with him. So people died because he did. In that time there were tall trees, but now there were only a few in the ravines, and these were small and crooked. It was very hard to find one that would make a good pole. I searched many days, going out early in the morning and coming back at night before I found enough for the house. I used rock for the back of the house, and the front I left open since the wind did not blow from this direction. The poles I made of equal length, using fire to cut them as well as a stone knife, which caused me much difficulty because I had never made such a tool before. There were 4 poles on each side set in the earth, and twice that many for the roof. These I bound together with sinew and covered with female kelp, which has broad leaves. The winter was half over before I finished the house, but I slept there every night and felt secure because of the strong fence. The foxes came when I was cooking my food and stood outside gazing through the cracks, and the wild dogs also came, gnawing at the whale ribs, growling because they could not get in. I shot 2 of them, but not the leader. While I was building the fence and the house, I ate shellfish and perch, which I cooked on a flat rock. Afterward, I made 2 utensils. Along the shore there were stones that the sea had worn smooth. Most of them were round, but I found 2 with hollow places in the center, which I deepened and broadened by rubbing them with sand. Using these to cook in, I saved the juices of the fish, which are good and were wasted before. For cooking seeds and roots, I wove a tighter basket of fine reeds, which was easy because I had learned how to do it from my sister Yulape. The After the basket had dried in the sun, I gathered lumps of pitch on the shore, softened them over the fire, and rubbed them on the inside of the basket so that it would hold water. By heating small stones and dropping them into the mixture of water, the seeds in the basket, I could make gruel. I made a place for fire in the floor of my house, hollowing it out and lining it with rocks. In the village of Galahas, we made new fires every night, but now I made one fire, which I covered with ashes when I went to bed. The next night, I would remove the ashes and blow on the embers. In this way, I saved myself much work. There were many gray mice on the island, and now that I had food to keep from one meal to the other, I needed a safe place to put it. On the face of the rock, which was at the back wall of my house, were several cracks as high as my shoulder. These I cut out and smoothed to make shelves where I could store my food, and the mice could not reach it. By the time winter was over and the grass began to show green on the hills of my house was comfortable. I was sheltered from the wind and rain and prowling animals. I could cook anything I wished to eat. Everything I wanted was there at hand. It was now time to make plans for getting rid of the wild dogs which had killed my brother and would kill me should they ever come upon me unarmed. I needed another and heavier spear, also a larger bow and sharper arrows. To collect the material for these weapons, I searched the whole island, taking many suns to do it. This left only the nights to work on them. Since I could not see well by the dim fire I used for cooking, I made lamps of dried bodies of little fish, which we call saysay. The saysay is the color of silver, not much bigger than a finger. On nights when the moon shines full, these little fish come swimming out of the sea in schools so thick that you can almost walk on them. They come with the waves and twist and turn on the sand as if they were dancing. I caught many basketfuls of saysay and put them out in the sun. Hung up by their tails from the poles of the roof, they made much odor, but burned with very clear light. I made the bow and arrows first and was pleased when I tried them that I could shoot farther and much straighter than I had before. The spear I left to the last. I wondered as I smoothed and shaped the long handle and fitted a stone collar around the end, both to give the spear weight and to hold the spear point, if I could make this point the way the men of our tribe did, from the tooth of a sea elephant. Many nights I thought about it, wondering how I could possibly kill one of these great beasts. I could not use a net of kelp because that needed the strength of several men, nor could I remember that a bull elephant had ever been killed with an arrow or with a spear. Only after they had been caught in the net were they killed, and then with a club. We killed many cows for their oil using spears, but the teeth were not large. How would I do this? I did not know. Yet the more I thought about it, the greater was my determination to try, for there was nothing to be found on the island that made such good spear points as the tusk-like teeth of bull sea elephant. This is chapter 13. I did not sleep much that night before I went to the place of the sea elephants. I thought again about the law that forbade women to make weapons, and I wondered if my arrows would go straight, and if they did, would they pierce the animal's tough hide? What if one of the bulls turned on me? What if I were injured and then had to fight the wild dogs as I dragged myself homeward? I thought about these things most of the night, but with the sun up, and I was on my way to the place where the sea elephants lived. When I reached the cliff, the animals had left the reef and gathered along the shore. Like gray boulders, the bulls sat on the pebbly slope. Before them, the cows and their babies played in the waves. Perhaps it is not right to speak of young sea elephants as babies, for they are as large as a man, but they are still babies in many ways. They follow their mothers around, waddling along on their flippers like children learning to walk, making crying sounds and sounds of pleasure that only the young make. And before they will leave the shore and learn to swim, their mothers have to push them into the sea, which is often difficult to do because of their size. Some distance separated the bulls from each other, for they are bad tempers, very jealous by nature, and quick to fight over anything that displeases them. There were 6 of them below me on the slope, each sitting alone like a great chief watching his herd of cows and babies. The cow has a smooth body and a face that looks much like that of a mouse with a sharp pointed nose and whiskers, but the bull is different. His nose has a large hump on it which hangs down over his mouth. His skin is rough and looks like wet earth that is dried in the sun and cracked. He is an ugly animal. From the top of the cliff, I looked down at each of the sea elephants and tried to choose the smallest of the six. They were all the same size, save one, which was the farthest from me and partly hidden by a rock. He was about half as large as the others, a young bull. Since no cows were playing among the waves in front of him, I knew that he did not have a herd of his own, and for that reason would not be so wary or quickly angered. Quietly, I let myself down over the edge of the cliff. To reach him, I had to pass behind the others, being careful not to alarm them. They feared nothing and would not move if they saw me, but it was better, I thought, not to put them on their guard. I carried my new bow, which was almost as tall as I was, and 5 arrows. The path was rough and covered with small stones. I took pains not to send them tumbling down the slope. I was also careful not to be seen by the cows, which get alarmed easily and would have warned the rest of the herd with their cries. I crawled behind a big rock near the young bull. I then got to my feet and fitted an arrow into the bow, although I suddenly remembered my father's warning that because I was a woman, the bow would break. The sun was far in the west, but luckily my shadow fell away from the young bull. The distance between us was short, and his back was turned squarely toward me. Still, I did not know where to place the first arrow, whether in his shoulders or in his head. The skin of the sea elephant is rough, yet very thin, but beneath it are thick layers of fat, and though his body is large, his head is small and make a poor target. While I stood there behind the rock, not knowing what to do, again aware of my father's warning that a bow in the hands of a woman would always break in a time of danger, the animal began to move toward the shore. At first I thought that by some chance he had heard me. I soon saw that he was on his way toward the cows that belonged to the old bull sitting nearby. The sea elephant moves fast in spite of his size, waddling along in his great flippers, which he uses like hands. The bull was nearing the water. I let the arrow go, and it went straight. At the last instant, he changed directions, and though the bow did not break, the arrow passed harmlessly to one side. I had failed to notice that the old bull was moving down the slope until I heard stones grating against each other. Quickly, he overtook his rival with a single thrust of his shoulders, overturned him. The young bull stood as high and as tall as a man and was twice that length. Yet from the force of the blow, he rolled into the water and lay there stunned. The old bull bore down on him, swinging his head and bellowing so loud it echoed against the cliffs. The herd of cows and calves who were lying in the waves and scratching their backs with their flippers stopped to watch the battle. 2 of the cows were in the bull's path as he waddled towards his rival, but he went over to them as if they were small stones. Using his tusk-like teeth, he ripped a long gash in the young bull's side. The young bull raised himself as he turned, his small eyes shone fiercely red, and when the old bull slashed at him again, he struck first and sunk his teeth into the other's neck. He did not let go, and the 2 rolled over in the waves, splashing water high into the air. The cows had scattered by now, but the other bull sat quietly on the slope. The 2 fighters paused, getting ready for a new attack. It was a good chance to send an arrow into the young bull who lay on his back with his teeth still grasping the other's neck, but I hoped that he would win the battle, and I stood there and did not move. The old bull had many deep scars on his head and shoulders from battles he had fought before, and suddenly he lashed out with his tail, trying to loose the hold on his neck, and struck the side of a rock. With his tail against the rock, he flung his body out of the water and thus broke away. He came quickly up the slope, his great mouth open and the young bull close behind him. He came toward me, and in haste to get out of his way, not knowing whether he was bent on attacking me, I stepped back. In doing so, I tripped over a stone and fell to my knees. I felt a sharp pain in my leg, but was quickly up. By this time, the old bull had whirled around and turned upon his pursuer so fast that the young bull was taken by surprise. Again, the young bull's flank was ripped deep, and again the force of the blow threw him backward into the water. The waves grew redder from his blood, but this time he rolled over and was waiting for the charge. He met the old bull with his shoulder, and the sound was like rocks crashing together. Once more the young bull caught the other's throat, and together they disappeared beneath a wave. And when they came up, they were still locked together. The sun had gone down, and it was so dark I could no longer see clearly. My leg had now begun to hurt, and since I had a long way to go, I left them. I could hear their bellowing as I went up the cliff for a long time afterward. We'll stop today. That's chapters 12 and 13 Also, remember to try to do as much of the open book test as you can today. I hope you have a great day, and I will be with you again tomorrow.